All right, fellas. So this is part 2 of our lab. So I'm going to try to walk you through this, exactly what we're going to do. Hopefully you've already got your Google stuff all set up, right? So you should be able to open up your Google console. So I'm going to jump into my Google console, and I've got my 3 machines in here. Well, let me move over here to compute and bring up my compute. Alright, so I've got a couple instances in here. So I've got my app server, my database server, my authentication server, and I'm going to go ahead and start these all up. So I'm going to go up here to the top, click Start. We'll give this a second for these machines to start up. So one of the things I want to show you real quick is, well, first we got to get the external IP on our app server. Mine is not showing up, probably because I just restarted it. So if I go over here and just refresh the screen, let's see if it shows up. It should get a public IP after it starts. There we go. There's our public IP. And actually, I think this is the same as it was before. We were wondering about that last time. So one thing I wanted to show you real quick is I've got Notepad++ installed on my computer. And there's also an application called FileZilla that can do FTP that you could try. But you can interact with your server through SSH, right? And if we can SSH to it, that means we can use SSH to pull and push files. And the cool thing about Notepad++ is it lets us work with those files directly on the server. So I'm going to add a new one. We'll call this CIS 285A app server. I'm going to plug in that host name. I should be able to log in as root. Hopefully I remember my password. I keep yelling at you guys to remember the password. One setting I forgot to change there, though, is FTP. We're going to set to SFTP. I think that should work. So SFTP is actually just FTP over SSH. We could install FTP and allow those ports on FTP, and then we could just use FTP if we wanted to, though. That would also work. So let me see if this works. This is the first time I'm trying it. I've never tried this with in the Google Cloud. I'm going to go ahead and accept that host key. Let's see if it gives us a directory listing. Oh, unable to authenticate. So let me check my records and see if I got the right password. Well, the good news is if you forget your password, you can still use this SSH tool to connect from the browser. You can see here I tried a bunch of different passwords and I remembered what it was. So I should be able to go in and change it. And I'll just leave this up for right now. But I'm going to go back over to Notepad. Go into my profile. Let's see if this works. Oh, maybe I typed it wrong again. There we go. So I'm connected, and it looks like I'm jailed into my home directory when I connect this way. So that's kind of annoying. So I'm stuck in my own root directory. I can't get out of this. But there's probably a setting somewhere where we can change it so we're not stuck in jail. So let me take a look. Let's go in here and see if there's an SSH setting for that. Well, that was bizarre, and I can only assume you guys will have the same thing. When I logged in, I don't know why, but I couldn't see any directories, so I right-clicked on root, and I went to create a new directory, and I just created a directory called test. Let me refresh this. So as soon as I created a directory called test, it showed me all my directories. Of course, I don't want that directory, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So I'll delete that directory. But there was no settings in there. Now that I've got this open, I can actually show you, right? So if I go into Etsy and I go into SSH, right? And some of you may find that this is a little bit easier than dealing with the what do you call it? VI. Where's SSH in here? Oh, here's HTTPD, right? So there's the Apache config. Right, so this is where we went to set that config file. In fact, we can open it up. There it is. So I could go in here and start messing with this config file and make changes in here and just save it. It'll automatically save it back to the server, so I don't have to mess around with these files. So that's certainly one option that we could do. So I just wanted to show you that real quick. So you can set yourself up to edit these files this way rather than having to connect to the server. I'm curious though why I can't see the SSH config file in here. I should be able to. Oh, there it is. I'm just going a little too fast, right? Alright, so now that we got that done, our next step in the lab, let's go back to the console. We need to connect to the database server and install a database engine. So I think we're going to use Maria SQL, which is also MySQL. I suppose we could use either one, but let's give this a try. So I'm going to open up SSH in a browser window. And you could just use PuTTY. If you recall, we were using PuTTY in class to connect to these machines, which is probably a little bit easier. I don't recall if I set mine up to work with PuTTY. Let me take a look. So it looks like I did not set it up, so I'm going to have to do that real quick. So step number one is I have to change my root password. Alright, so that's updated. Now I should be able to log in as root. And now I can check my SSH config file. Whoops, that's not the right file name. Oh, SSH config. I used a dot instead of an underscore. It's always the little things that get us. Alright, so I just have to go in here. You guys hopefully remember how to do this. I have to change permit root logon. So that's going to be a yes. And we are going to set password authentication also to a yes. All right. So that should have restarted my service, which means if I come back over here and connect to database, there it is. And I think if I just do a refresh on root, there we go. All you have to do is refresh it and you can see everything in root. Alright, so the next step. Since PuTTY works better, I'm going to use PuTTY to connect to my machine. So there's my IP address. This is CS285B for my database server. I want to make this a little bit easier for you guys to read it. Alright, that's a little bit better. So we have a couple different options with the databases here. We could use PostGre, we could use Maria, we could use MySQL. I think I'm going to see if we can use Maria. Let me just take a look. Alright, so I just did a little bit of Googling, and it looks like MariaDB is the one recommended for CentOS, although we could use either Maria or MySQL, but we'll go ahead and install Maria. So I'm going to do yum install MariaDB server and MariaDB clients, because we'll need both the servers and the clients. So we'll let this run. Hopefully it finds what we need. Wow, it's 110 megs. It's a pretty big install. So this is all the stuff we need for MariaDB. So you can see it's a lot of components. So let me just go ahead and say yes, and we'll let this run. All right, so success. It looks like the installation is complete, but we are not quite done yet. There is a process that you have to go through after you install MariaDB. Well, first we have to start the service, right? So I've been using the service command, but I'll use the correct command for a little while, right? So let's check the status on MariaDB. So it's disabled right now. So we want to enable. And if we did that right, after we enable, we start. Alright, so hopefully it is started. Let's take a look at status. And it's running, so that's a good sign. And there's some log entries there, so it's doing some stuff. So the next thing we got to do is there is a little command that gets installed that will secure your database installation. There's a lot of stuff going on in your database usually, so we want to make sure that it's secure. So we'll run this little command. Oh, that's interesting. It's not taking my password. Oh, this is the root password for Maria, not for Linux. So we're going to go ahead and set. I just hit enter to leave it blank, and I'm going to set it. And by the way, I'm going to set it to the same thing that I set my root password in Linux. That way, just to keep it all the same. Do I want to remove anonymous users? Yes, I probably want to do that. Disallow root login remotely. I am not going to do that because we're not going to create a bunch of users for our database, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. Let's see, remove the test database and access to it. I'm going to say no. We'll leave the test database in place. I don't even know what's in there. Reload privilege tables, sure, why not? Thanks for using MariaDB, and we're done. So we set up our simple database engine. So the next step is we want to see if we can log into our database, right? So I believe the command, even though it's MariaDB, we use the MySQL command to log into it. Well, let's see. We're going to use MySQL -u root and -p. Oops. Let me try that again. There we go. Now I'm in. So I think we can show a list of databases. There we go. So there's our test database. Let's see what's in our test database. So I'm going to use test. Show tables. There's no tables in it. So we're going to drop, well, let's do this. Use MySQL. All right, that's our MySQL databases. So we're going to drop, oops, sorry, drop table, or I'm sorry, drop database test, because we really don't need it. Oh, it's all lowercase test. This is part of the hardening process, right? We don't want anything we don't need. So we're going to try to harden by removing things we don't need in this case. Excuse me. I don't need that test database. All right. So the next step, now that we have the database installed, our next step would be to set up our database. So let me conjure up some database code for you real quick that we're going to use. So let's see. We are going to make a sample application. All right, so as I said in class, this is going to be a basic a grade book, right? Just a little grade book. So let's start by creating our new little database. So I'm going to create a database. Oh, wait, I already created my app database, right? So we want to use sample app. Oh, what did I do wrong here? Show databases. I did not create sample app. Okay, so create database. I'm going to call it gradebook. Alright, now we should be able to use gradebook, and it is case sensitive SQL. So we're going to create a table. This is going to be a really basic table, right? Nothing complicated going on here. I'm going to call it grades. It's going to have some columns. We're going to have a column called name. By the way, that's not a quote that I'm putting there. That is a that's the grave symbol that you see there, right? So that around the around name. So it's not a single quote. It's right above the tab key on my keyboard. It's got the tilde on the top. It's right next to number 1. So if you look at the number 1 on your keyboard, look to the left. That's the button I'm hitting right before the word class here. So I'm just going to have, I think we're just going to create a couple tables, just 3 columns here, right? Make it really simple. Name, class, grade. That's it. Right? So I just need a grade. I'm just making these all varchar 64 in the real world. We would obviously not do that, but this isn't a database class, so I'm not too concerned about it. So now I should, if I do show tables, I should see there's my grades table. So now I have to insert some records. So insert into grades. I did call it grades, right? Yep, grades. I used all lowercase though. So I have to tell it what the column names are. Actually, I think we can get away without. I think we can just do this. We can just do values, and the name is John Smith for the first one. I'm just making these up. The class is CIS 285, and the grade is a D. There we go. That inserted. What else do we have? We want another student, so I'll use the old classic John Doe. And I'm going to give John a C. I'll put myself in here. I'm going to be the overachiever with an A+. Let's see, how about... no girls in our class. Let's give her a B. Do one more. Good old Johnny drop tables. You always need one of those. Johnny's got a C. Alright, so now if I select star from grades, there's my records in the database. So that should get our database set up. Our next step is to create a simple application that's going to use this database, and that's going to be on our app server. So from our app server, we're going to make a simple web page that's just going to display the contents of this database, and maybe we'll put some functionality in there to be able to do a query or something like that. So let me see if I can conjure up a little web application for you. So I'm going to pause the video for a second. So before we can start to build our web application, let's make sure that we can actually access that database. So this is the window for my PuTTY connection to the first server, or I'm sorry, the database server. So let me do a PuTTY connection to my app server. And don't worry, I will change the font size so you can see it. That's a little better, right? All right. So I'm in. Let's try MySQL. Command's not found. So I have to install the MySQL clients on here, or the MariaDB client. So I'm only going to do the client on this one. I don't need to install the server. So it should be significantly smaller. Interesting. It says the Maria client, there is no Maria client package available. Well, let's see. Alright, after just a moderate amount of Googling around, I think I figured it out. So we just do yum install. You only want the MySQL client, but you just have to put MySQL because it's MySQL-server to install the MySQL server. And MariaDB doesn't have its own client application yet, so they're still using the MySQL command to access it, which you saw on the database server, right? I ran the MySQL command and I was able to access my Maria database server and do what I needed to do. So this should work. So I'm just going to go ahead and install that. Now you can see it's actually coming from MariaDB, right? So now I can run the MySQL command. The thing is, I want to connect to MySQL on a different server, right? I don't want to use my own machine, so the machine I'm connected to. So let's see what options we have here with the command. So we need, I know -u for user because we saw that before, right? So let's see, MySQL options and then database. So let's see if we can figure this out. Oh, there we go. Connect to host. So -h is, and then we put the host name in. So it's going to be the IP address of our other machine. And that should, I think that's all we need. So -h and then -u. So let's try that. So let's do -h, and I'm going to use the internal IP address of the database server, right? 10.128.0.5. So let's go back over to PuTTY. So 10.128.0.5 is the database server. And the username is going to be root -p interactive mode for password. And it looks like our server is not allowed to connect to that MariaDB server, so there must be some configuration that we have to do to allow remote login to that server. So let's swing back over to our database server. So I'm going to get back to the command line. There should be some, let's look in Etsy and see if there's a MariaDB in here. And I don't see a MariaDB. So it might be MySQL. Let's see if there's a MySQL. Yeah, my.conf.d is probably the MySQL config. Or not. So this is just my.conf. This looks like it's only for the client, not for the server itself. But let's just make sure we don't see anything in here. Well, it says MySQLD, right? So that should be the daemon. So let me see if we can find some documentation that shows us how to bind to port numbers and accept connections. Alright, so let's try this. We're not going to want to use root anyway. So let's create a new user. We'll just try this from scratch. So I'm going to create a user called Grader. So create user. Oh wait, I have to do it in the database. Let me log into MySQL first. So I'm going to log in as root. By the way, I'm on the database server. Logging in as root. My password is Camden. Now I'm going to create user Grader. And I'm going to grant them access to from any machine, right? So Grader at % means doesn't matter where they log in from. So Grader at % identified by, and then I got to put some kind of password in here. Password. Stupidest password in the world, right? Alright, then I'm going to grant them access. So grant all privileges. Let's see. Oh, it's on. Sorry. And the database is going to be gradebook. Don't forget, that's not a quote around that, right? That's going to be the that weird quote that's next to the number 1, right? We're going to grant access to Grader. And I'm putting the % on there just so it doesn't matter where they log in from. Okay, that should have worked. So now I should be able to come back over here. And if I just to try it, if we try to log in as Grader, and I don't put the -p, it's not going to let me log in. I have to add the -p, and of course if I don't put a password in, it won't let me connect. So, oh, forgot the -h. Let me go back here. Sorry. So -h 10.128.0.5. Alright, so that should fail because I have to use the password. And if I do a -p and I forget to put a password in, it fails. So I have to put in password, and I'm in. And if I do show databases, there's Gradebook. I can use Gradebook. Oh, nope, I can't. You know, it's probably case sensitive. Let's find out. There we go. Show tables. There's grades. Select star from grades. Hey, there it is. So there's my list of grades. All right, so we know we can connect now from the from app server. on the local area network. If we really want to get fancy, what we probably should do over here on this server is use the firewall CMD command, right? So there's a whole bunch of options in there, but we should, just like we did on the app server where we locked down the firewall to only allow certain ports, we should just set this up to only allow SSH and 3306, which is MySQL and MariaDB. So MariaDB binds to port 3306, so we should only allow port 3306 into that second machine, to the D database machine. Not going to do that right now, though. We might come back and do that later when we start to harden this little network that we're creating with these Linux machines. But for right now, let's see if we can create our little PHP application. So let me see, again, if I can get some code for you that we can use just to kind of interact with this little database.